The dictionary definition of a doomsday scenario is an extremely serious or dangerous situation that could end in days or destruction. It is a phrase which describes an apocalyptic event, and it often appears in sci-fi until not so long ago. Few of us expected to encounter a doomsday scenario in real life. Doomsday scenarios can be all-encompassing, leading to the extinction of all life, including human life on Earth. The term apocalypse comes from the book of Revelations in the Bible. It is steeped in religious beliefs about the end of the world and the end of time itself. But now it is widely used to describe any event that would end life and civilization as we know it. The internet is full of conspiracy theories that world governments are making contingency plans for a terrifying multitude of apocalyptic scenarios such as alien invasion, asteroid impact, global plague, all-out nuclear war, volcanic eruptions, extreme climate change, technological meltdown, anarchy, overpopulation, and genocide. All of us have fleetingly thought about what we would do in the event of a global disaster, maybe after watching Armageddon or the day after tomorrow. Would we assemble loved ones and scramble into the car before heading for the hills via a gridlocked motorway? Would we be organized enough to pack tents, blankets, water, food supplies, and clean pants, or would we just run?
All over the world, individuals are preparing for doomsday, whether it is caused by a natural disaster, a pandemic like the recent COVID-19, an outbreak of war, or civil unrest. Doomsday preppers are preparing to outlast and outlive any apocalyptic scenario.
My name is Kassaye. I'm a filmmaker. Today, I've set out to explore the world of Doomsday Preppers. For months, millions of people have faced a dreadful new question as coronavirus cases have mounted around the world. How do you survive a pandemic? Most countries are now in lockdown. Although there have been plagues before, like the medieval Black Days and the Spanish flu epidemic of 1918. The scale of national lockdowns is unprecedented. It is not a stretch of the imagination to see this as a doomsday scenario. In the early days of the first lockdown in London in March 2020, I ventured out of my house for a quick drive to do some food shopping. What I saw and experienced that day was eerie to say the least. The busy streets of London Camden Town were deserted. Shops were all locked up. No street traders to be seen anywhere. Long queues of people stood outside banks and supermarkets. Everyone was wearing face masks. It felt as if I was watching a scene from a sci-fi movie. Was this what Doomsday looked like? We all knew then that things were bad, but we didn't know how bad. And most of us were not prepared for worse to come. The 1918 Spanish flu pandemic was the most severe pandemic in recent history. It is estimated that about 500 million people, or 1/3 of the world's population, became infected with this virus. The number of deaths was estimated to be at least 50 million worldwide. A quarter of the British population were affected. The death toll was 228,000 in Britain alone. COVID-19 has claimed nearly 80,000 lives in the UK so far. But after 9 months of governmental controls and the arrival of a mutant strain of the virus, that figure is rising by 1,000 per day. So it is catching up fast. Most of us are in shock. But for some people, the so-called Doomsday Preppers, none of this has come as a surprise. They have been expecting catastrophe all along.
Go, 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 go.
Doomsday Preppers are a loosely knit group who have often been ridiculed as paranoid loonies. Not so much now. Their name comes from its members' shared philosophy. Being prepared for all kinds of calamities is a lifestyle. Preppers have watched the shutdown of life as we know it and the panic-stricken global scramble for supplies with a mix of stoicism and concern.
I can't believe what people are doing inside. Shelves are empty. It's like we're going to I don't know where. It really is unexplainable.
Tensions flared at Woolworths Chullora around 7 o'clock this morning when 3 women became involved in a toilet paper tussle.
Preppers believe we are closer than ever to a complete collapse of civilization and that we ought to prepare for it before it is too late. I wanted to find out more about their mindset and their lifestyle. I invited the American prepper Luke Greer for a Zoom interview.
Well, I became a prepper relatively later into my teen years, maybe 18 or 19 or so. And it wasn't some huge decision that I had to make to become one. It just kind of came with the lifestyle. You know, growing up in Louisiana in the backwoods, so to speak, you know, I mean, we live way back in the sticks. We've always lived on a pretty sizable plot of land. It kind of just came natural, you know. I was raised around guns. I was raised to be able to hunt and fish for my own food, and we always grew up with a garden of some sort or another. So really, prepping just kind of was the natural step up from there, you know, being able to provide for your family if no one else could, if, you know, the grocery stores couldn't help you. It just kind of was the natural progression up from there. My wife and I got married, you know, last year in April, and she really wasn't into it so much. She, you know, just kind of had the base idea of, you know, well, you know, everything's fine, then we're fine, you know. Well, as this pandemic came around, as the COVID-19 virus came around, that's when I started being able to put into her head. I was like, hey, you should have got a couple of cans the last time you went grocery shopping. Like, shouldn't you? You should have got a few cans of Spam or you know, a box of water or something the last time we went shopping. And it's kind of funny because when I was doing it on my own, you know, we didn't have, you know, a whole lot of cans because she did the primary grocery shopping, and that was her thing. That was her project. But after COVID-19 hit, we have about double the amount of supplies that we had before the virus hit, and I haven't gone shopping since the virus. If that tells you anything, it kind of opened her eyes up as to what my point of view was on the situation.
Of course, not everybody agrees with Luke Greer. GCSE student Emmanuel has something to say.
In my opinion, I think Doomsday Preppers are a bit extremist in the fact that they're praying for supposed doomsday. In my opinion, I don't think a doomsday is to come, but if there is an event where there is a doomsday, I don't think we can prepare for it. The doomsday most likely will be a nuclear event or pandemic event, and I doubt we'll be able to prepare for that. I suppose you could set up bunkers and create supplies for food and shelter, but in general, I don't think a large majority of the public will be able to prepare for a doomsday.
I can't disagree with somebody calling me paranoid. Like, yeah, I'm sure I can, I say, yeah, I'm paranoid, but I'd rather be paranoid and be wrong than be ignorant and not understand what's going on.
Pastor Paul Begley from Indiana is very much known for giving sermons on doomsday or the apocalypse in churches in the USA. I asked him over a Zoom interview if we can prepare for the doomsday, as many preppers like Luke are already doing.
It's okay to, I know a lot of people that are preppers, and it's okay to have, 30 days worth of food, water, backup generators, batteries, gas mask. It's okay. There could be an earthquake, volcano, there's hurricanes, there's all kinds of typhoons. But to actually prepare according to the Bible, to prepare for doomsday, impossible. According to the Bible, it says that men will run to the rocks and the mountains. They will hide in it, trying to hide themselves from the face of the Lord returning. That the earth will be reeling and rocking like a drunkard man. That every mountain's going to be moved and every island out of its place. There's just really no way to prepare for a global cataclysmic events that could be, whether it's an asteroid that hits the earth or whatever it is God wants to use, although, and that even says it in the scripture. The Bible says in Revelation, 1/3 of the world's population will die from a deep impact asteroid, and the water will turn to wormwood or to poison or bitterness. How do you prepare for that? The only way to prepare for the apocalypse is first within. And I would say it has to be your relationship with God and with your fellow man. And that's really the only way to prepare for this first.
To most people is the best kind of attitude to have. Your best weapon could very well be your attitude. If you kind of go around thinking, man, this is a really bad situation, I don't know how I'm going to make it through these hard times, you're probably not going to be one of the ones that are better off in these situations. Another piece of my advice is have a plan, be prepared, have another plan, have a couple more plans, and then, have a positive attitude.
Maybe the preppers are the only sane people. Maybe disaster is always around the corner. Maybe it is a fluke that the human race has avoided annihilation so far. Consider the case of Stanislav Petrov. On September 26, 1983, the planet came terrifyingly close to a nuclear holocaust. On that day, Soviet Lieutenant Colonel Stanislav Petrov was on duty monitoring the USSR's missile attack early warning system. Suddenly, a screen displayed the word launch in large red letters. The warning system transmitted with high reliability the message that an American intercontinental ballistic missile, ICBM, had been launched and was headed towards the Soviet Union. Petrov had to make an instant decision with potentially apocalyptic consequences. Should he report an incoming American strike and trigger nuclear war? Petrov did not report the incoming strike. He and others on his staff concluded that what they were seeing was a false alarm. And it was the system had mistaken the sun's reflection of clouds for a missile. Petrov's skepticism saved the world, preventing annihilating nuclear warfare between the Soviets, the US, and its allies. Doomsday is shape-shifting. It could come in the form of worldwide financial collapse. The financial crash of 2008 was the greatest jolt to the global financial system in almost a century. It pushed the world's banking system towards the edge of collapse. Within a few weeks in September 2008, Lehman Brothers, one of the world's biggest financial institutions, went bankrupt. 90 billion pounds was wiped off the value of Britain's biggest companies in a single day. And there was even talk of cash machines running empty. In one way or another, every major civilization before us had collapsed. Think of the fall of Rome. What guarantee do we have that Western democracies will survive? The coronavirus pandemic and the lockdown measures which have failed to contain it have plunged the global economy into a severe contraction. According to the IMF, the great lockdown of COVID-19 is likely to cause the worst economic downturn since the Great Depression of the 1930s. The planet's major religions each have their own beliefs about a doomsday scenario. Some Christians interpret the book of Revelation of the Bible as a roadmap that lays out exactly how the world will end.
Term doomsday, of course, there's a doomsday clock that's out there. And the world, I think, looks at that and says, okay, nuclear detonation, disease, plague, wars, rumors of wars, different things that could bring about doomsday. But from a prophecy standpoint, the world, what the world calls doomsday, Christians call the day of the Lord, okay? The return of Christ or the rapture of the church, okay? These are all kind of the terminology, okay? So mankind has been infatuated with doomsday, the termination, the end of days as we know it, the end of the age.
To be a prepper, just stockpiling food and supplies is not enough. You need to learn survival skills to adapt to extreme environments and live. There is a whole community of preppers on the internet with blogs and videos on how to survive a catastrophe. There are also a few shops in the UK that sell doomsday survival gear. One of these shops is Doomsday Preppers Limited. It is located in East Yorkshire, in a place called Goole. I decided to pay a visit.
But doomsday could be perceived in many, many different ways, from anything from the lights going out to the internet being turned off these days. I think the current situation with COVID-19 has demonstrated that actually the threat is very real. Anything could happen, and people need to be prepared for the worst case scenario. Number one priority for anyone who's going to be building their own survival kit, it's got to be water and the ability to make clean water. So something as simple as this costs a couple of pounds. Water purifying tablets. You can see how much space they take up. Really, really lightweight. Something you can keep in your cupboard, in your car, in your go bag, ready to go. There's enough in there to keep you going for a week or two with fresh water. Even dirty water is still going to be made safe to drink just by putting a couple of those tablets in there. We can survive weeks without food, but only a couple of days without fresh water.
So what is the pathology of Doomsday Preppers? Are they crazy, or is it us? I wanted to learn more about the psychology behind survivalist subcultures, so I invited RAF survival expert John Hudson and survival psychologist Dr. Sarita Robinson for Zoom interviews.
Prepping and preppers tend to have a range of different approaches, from some people who would maybe even buy an old nuclear missile silo in America and convert it into bomb-proof condos, through to other people who perhaps just keep some more medicines and food under the stairs in case there's limited access to those facilities. So preppers and prepping, in my understanding of it, is a huge range of different kinds of behaviours that are primarily done to try to adapt to unforeseen, but not necessarily impossible, misadventures.
I asked psychobiologist Dr. Sarita Robinson why some people become Doomsday Preppers.
So it's really a good question why some people become Doomsday Preppers. We don't see it so much in the UK. I think that's possibly because we don't have as many natural disasters. And therefore we don't have that frontier mentality that you may see in places like America, where obviously they have tornadoes, earthquakes, other natural disasters that mean that an end of day scenario seems just a bit more likely. I'd say that with prepping, I encourage everybody to prep. I think it's a really good thing to do, to think about what could go wrong and then plan for it, as long as it doesn't get in the way of everyday life. So you don't want to be spending hundreds and thousands of pounds on a nuclear bunker in your back garden and giving up the day job. But having an extra supply of toilet roll, as during this recent pandemic has been shown to be a really good idea, is a really good way of prepping. But when people take it to the extremes, it becomes more of a lifestyle choice. And these people are basically forming their identity around being a prepper, being self-sufficient, being able to care for themselves and their family in what they think is a probabilistic, apocalyptic view of the world. Now, with climate change on the horizon and the recent COVID-19 pandemic, who's to say that they're not wrong?
When anything bad happens, people will respond in a predictable pattern of behaviours, from the psychological through to the physical. If we look specifically at the psychological dimension, then it could be anything. It could be a ship sinking or an airplane crashing in my world, or maybe an earthquake or some kind of pandemic type scenario for the masses of the civilian population. When those sorts of bad things happen, humans will respond in several ways. We've got the fight, flight and freeze response, if it's a dramatic, dynamic, bang type event. And also, as we adapt psychologically afterwards, there's a pattern that we will go through, and we can fall into different groups. What we do where I work is we train people how to plug the right fill for those sorts of inappropriate type responses. So we know that if a disaster occurs, roughly 10% of the population will behave in a suitable way, which means that they're promoting their own survival. Now that could be from a range of different experiences that they've had, maybe training that they've been given, but the vast majority of us, 75%-ish, will be stunned or bewildered by these events. Fact. What our training aims to do is to give the 75% the right responses so that if a bad thing happens, it pushes them up into the appropriate response section. Now, we do that very, very deliberately for specific kinds of challenges that military personnel face. What prepping is, I think, is trying to give yourself the plug to fit a very, very, very wide range of potential outcomes. And it's a pretty big ask, so it can take a lot of dedication and time to get that kind of mental cassette for yourself.
When I ventured out on the eerie streets of London in the early days of the lockdown, I never imagined that I would become one of the victims of the unfolding catastrophe. I observed the strangeness of the moment with a kind of detachment. But on the morning of December 10th, 2020, my own private encounter with Doomsday began. When I woke up that morning, everything in my body hurt. It felt as if an elephant was sitting on my chest. I knew it was COVID-19, but I took the test anyway. And sure enough, it came back positive. I am a father and a husband, and my first thoughts were, how am I going to protect my family? And they need me. I can't die. Not now. I quarantined myself to my bedroom. Day by day, my condition deteriorated. What began as something like a very bad dose of the flu worsened into something like pneumonia with bells on. 5 days in, I couldn't barely breathe. I couldn't keep food or liquid down. I couldn't think. I was burning up. The headaches were hammering. 6 days in, my breathing difficulties intensified. My lungs were shutting down. It felt like dying. My family feared for my life. They called for a paramedic and I was taken to UCL hospital to be put on oxygen. I don't remember much about that time. I was only half alive. My dreadful journey with this terrible illness did not stop with oxygenation. At UCL, I was beset by stomach pains, head pains, heart palpitations, and when I was taken off oxygen, I still gasped for breath. Keep your hopes up. Stay strong. You will beat this. I remember the voices of my doctors, the nurses, my family and friends piercing through the fog of pain. I kept thinking, is this it? Am I going to die? Is this the end of my journey on this planet? Will I see my family again? But I knew I had to be strong for them, for my wife, for my sons, for those that risked their lives, saving mine. Thanks to God and to all who looked after me at the hospital, I came back from my trip to the underworld, but I will never be the same. I know what Doomsday looks like, up close and personal. I will never take my life for granted. I will never think it won't happen to me. The Doomsday Preppers look very different to me now. Maybe they have it right, and the rest of us are deluded. Every second of our short lives matters. we cannot afford to be complacent about the survival of the human race. Our time as the species who has ruled the planet may be coming to an end. Let us enjoy the time we have before it is too late. Doomsday means different things to different people. Some of us feel we can and should prepare for it. Some of us don't want to live in fear. After surviving my own personal doomsday, I believe the only certainty we can entertain is that we stand a better chance of surviving destruction if we stand together.